My fellow Amazonians, good morning. This is Dr. Chua Yaba. Today is the 25th of June, 2024. It's my daily address to you people. I'd like you to know that the last 7 years has been predictable. Predictable because the last 63 years has been very predictable in terms of the attitude of the different actors in Cameroon, whether it was Ayijo, Bia, Foshive, and others. It has also been predictable because of the different actors who have been sent into Ambazonia as SDOs, governors, and all through these years, we have come to understand Cameroon perfectly. Their international posture has also been very, very predictable. In terms of international relations, they built bilateral relationships with countries. They build multilateral relationships. But most importantly, they establish a kind of political system that internationally was deceptive and masked a regime of terror at the domestic level. I have spoken about this before. Cameroon is not like North Korea that may simply refuse to sign international treaties. Cameroon has basically signed most international human rights treaties, except I think it's not a member of the ICC, but it has basically signed most international human rights treaties. And the reason has been very clear. It has done so to show the international community that it is a perfect member of the international system. It has ratified these treaties. It has, in certain circumstances, altered its constitution to give assent to these treaties. It has set up domestic institutions to oversee the implementation of these treaties, or at least to monitor. It has engaged in international reporting. Most treaties, human rights treaties, require state parties to submit periodic reports. It has taken part in deliberations. Cameroon has organized regular elections. In all of these facades, what Cameroon masks is a system of deception, a system of violence, a system of corruption that is very difficult to attack because it is progressive. What the world sees is a country that organizes elections time and again. So it doesn't classify it as a totalitarian regime. The world then begins to focus on free and fair elections. What the world sees is a state that is a signatory to international human rights treaties, taking part in reporting, taking part in all forms of international processes. And so the world is convinced that what Cameroon requires is progressive implementation of these treaties: progressive development of its domestic processes towards a stable, norm-setting, human rights respecting state. What the world sees and expects is a domestic progressive system that will lead to a state that organizes free and fair election. Because what the world perceives as an alternative is destabilizing, unstable, chaos producing, and uncertainty. So what do you think the world will stand for? It will stand with progression rather than uncertainty and perceived chaos. I'm giving you these explanations so that you understand what I mean by predictability in both the actions, in both the actors, the institutions, and the processes of Cameroon. Biya never surprises me. Some of you glue yourself to the TV and expect Mr. Biya one day to come and say, well, I think we did some wrong here. I think that I'm offering these concessions on these issues. No, Biya has never done so. Biya has been clear from the beginning. He has been brutal. He has never made concessions. And he has never pretended to want to make concessions. So in developing a counter strategy to such a predictable system, you must also be clear. It's the lock and key approach. That's how you kill diseases. You study the structure of a disease. You develop a medication that fits into that structure and chop it off. From the beginning, we said Ambazonians should arm themselves to respond to the violence of the system. They armed themselves. And since then, they have been responding to the violence of the system. From the beginning, we made it absolutely clear it is not going to be a walk in the park. It is not a Rambo First Blood Part 1 and Part 2 that you know the plot and you know the end. No. Battles are unpredictable. The number of battles you win in a liberation war does not determine the outcome for you. You might win 90% of the battles and still lose the war. In liberation wars, the kinds of battles you win, they may be just 5 out of 100, might take you across the line. That is why in designing the holistic strategy of resistance, we factored in this reality. What is it about Cameroon that makes it so arrogant? What is it about Biya that makes him so triumphalistic? How has his strategy of occupation worked in his favor? Biya is deliberate. He's a very deliberate gentleman. He knows what he is doing. That is why he is predictable. He doesn't come one day and he's being the nice guy telling you that, you have a just cause or you have a cause. He tells you from the beginning, you are a chaos creator. That's how he defined John Frundi. He never changed until John Frundi blinked. And Biya does not forgive. So don't think that when you alter your attitude, you begin to change towards him. He is going to forget that you are the guy who called for ghost towns and destroy his economy for 9 months. Because that's the guy that killed his own wife. We said Cameroon relies on our economy, on our resources, so we should engage in economic sabotage to undermine their ability to make money from Ambazonia to fuel the war against Ambazonia. Our people embraced it. We said it is suicidal to believe that armed resistance alone will destroy the ability of Mr. Biya in the long run to continue the occupation. And that the South Africans did not succeed against a nuclear power. The ANC did not succeed against a nuclear power South Africa based on the institution of the armed resistance alone. We concluded that South Africans were able to convince the entire Africa, including the OAU, to isolate South Africa. For those who have had passports of La République before the end of apartheid system, you realize the passport was valid for all countries except South Africa. They engineered a system of international isolation. They persuaded countries to humiliate, shame, and isolate South Africa. That might not have had enough effect on the state of South Africa. But take note, if you were a white South African, it had an effect on you. South Africans were ashamed because they were exposed and shamed by the strategy of the ANC. Flying through airports, showing your passport as a white South African, invited a lot of shame and humiliation. How effective was that? What that did was it began gradually to create within the ordinary white South African a sense of betrayal, a sense of having dispossessed Black South Africans of their land. And while they enjoyed the economic benefits of apartheid, they knew it was unsustainable. Some of their businesses started moving monies out of South Africa, gradually weakening South African economy. Some of white South Africans, they began to move out. They began gradually to question the policy of apartheid. While the Umkhonto we Sizwe continued, South African students were up rejecting the policies of segregation as part and parcel of collective resistance. They did not surrender the resistance in the hands of the Umkhonto we Sizwe. There were also enablers. There were even established groups like within the Zulu section that were almost enabling the system, that attempted all the time to undermine the legitimacy of the ANC. So our domestic strategies were necessary. We embraced the ghost towns, even though we had questioned the effectiveness of the prolonged ghost towns as an effective tool of the SDF. And the reason why we had questioned the ghost town as an effective tool of the SDF was because it did not affect the political capital. it did not affect the center of power that John Frundi's strategy sought to undermine. That is why Biya was able to make a speech and said, if Yaoundé breathes, the whole of Cameroon is okay. Frundi was fighting to overthrow a government. We are fighting to liberate a land. We embrace the Monday ghost towns also because we realized that for 60-something years, one of the strategies of the enemy was to de-incentivize Ambazonians, was to uproot any sense of national being in the Ambazonian, was to humiliate Ambazonians to the extent where they began to question their own heritage. They began to question their language. They began to be ashamed of themselves. They began to be ashamed of themselves eating achu or nangtar or anything, timanambusa. They began to be ashamed telling people where they come from. That's why every Ambazonian from the northern zone comes from Bamenda. Because do you want to say you come from Alabukam? It was disgraceful. And it was deliberate. Strategy by the enemy to make you feel totally uprooted from your own foundation. So the ghost towns give us a national sense of consciousness, engineered a national sense of collective resistance and opposition to Cameroon, reminded us of why there is a struggle, reminded us of those who have died, of those who are in jail, those who are IDPs, refugees in exile. That's why we embrace the ghost towns. We embrace also the school boycott because we knew from the beginning distorting our system of education, revising our history was part and parcel of the overall strategy of making us forget our past, deceiving us to believe that we were Cameroonians. And so we believe totally collapsing the system of education that in itself made us slaves in our own land was necessary. But despite that, early on, we began to work on an alternative because we knew and understood the resilience of occupation, let alone that led by Mr. Biya, and a system that did not even believe that we were humans. So an alternative was necessary. We also called their bluff. Cameroon has prided itself from the beginning as a state with a violent gendarmerie. They instituted the B and, showcase its notoriety, its invincibility. I remember when I sent Ivo to attack a B center in Bengui. I was up following the attack. The team that lined up to stop any backup, and how Ivo went in front with the assault team, the immediate backup team. Why should we allow soft targets like police stations, gendarmerie barracks, checkpoints to go attack a B center? Because we wanted to call their bluff. We wanted to challenge the invincibility of the bees. We wanted to put them in their place. We knew it was easy, as you saw from the beginning, that you could strike them at their checkpoints. You could hit them in their unfortified barracks. But taking on the bee sends a message to the police and the gendarme that if these guys can hit the bee, then we are not safe. We sent a message through that to the mayors and the colonial deals and the SDOs and all the delegates that if these guys were brave enough to strike what they deem as their elite force, then no one was safe. And it worked. We also used that to inspire other Ambazonian units across, young boys and girls. If these guys could strike the bees and the gendarmes, then all of us also can build a unit and strike these people. We were not ashamed that we had Dengons. We were not ashamed that we had Changshu. We used it to inspire other Ambazonians across different places to know that it was possible. And it worked. We then sat down and looked at other strategies to undermine the enemy. I explained many times the concept of political legitimacy, how it is derived, and how it can be undermined. I talked about its relevance in providing occupation with international legitimacy and how that can be dismantled. I talked about the relevance for the occupation of elections as a democratic process to get Ambazonian consent to legitimize the occupation, and why we must stop every election. I talked about pseudo representation provided by Ambazonian so-called parliamentarians and senators in Cameroon that provided a facade for the enemy. I talked about the roles of chiefs, quarterheads in perpetuating governance, knowing fully well that the DOs and the SDOs relies on chiefs, these parliamentarians, quarterheads, to exercise governance. The necessity of dismantling them, recruiting them to work for self-governance for Ambazonia. This education was necessary because information knowledge is the first barrier against political and military occupation. We had social media warriors also, because as I have said repeatedly, our struggle is in the 21st century, where social media plays a very important role. Perception matters. Perception, true or false, could become reality. La Republique has believed in political propaganda all through its existence. It's never really won battles. It has just, the enemy or patriots have lost battles. La Republique has never won battles. It allows you to lose battles through time, corruption, and violence. And we knew from the beginning, political intoxication, narrative construction played a very significant role in defeating opposition to Cameroon's policies. That is why we frown at individuals who set up TV channels instead of deconstructing and reconstructing other narrative. They were attacking perceived so-called political rivals. And we put up an effective social media front that destroyed them, that exposed them, showed their weaknesses, showed them as a banana republic, showed their, octogenarians, senile men who should be in old people's home, trying to call the shot over a political system that is already bankrupt. We challenged their historical revisionism. We shut up, colonial apologists and impostors who wanted to speak on behalf of the regime perpetuating, a revisionist narrative, that did not reflect historical reality. We made it clear, you are not the so-called mother state of a non-existent Cameroon. There has never been any Cameroon in history. What we call German Cameroon stitched together different colonial entities for economic and political profit. You can simply just say, you were a state. Never been a state called Cameroon until 1st January 1960. We made all of these things public so that our people had sound minds, sound knowledge, not only about who we are, about what we fight against. And we didn't stop there. We started showing what we fight for. The flag, an anthem, political system. We showcased our resources, how we were going to use these resources to build better schools. We produce a curriculum of education that is superb, built from studying the 10 best curriculum of education across the world, from countries that education has shown to have direct correlation with the production of world employment and economic opportunities. We've been doing all of these things and they've called us all sort of names, but we know the regime we are up against. We came with the notion of taxation, no number plate, and because even the same people who rejected armed resistance, they now started saying, no, we should focus on the quintessential strategy of armed resistance. Yet they could neither buy a bullet, they could never, sustain a unit. Look, my people, this war is not about the battles you win. This war is about the battles you don't fight and the battles you lose. This war is about nerves. It's not about how you deal with victory. It's not about how you deal with Ambazonians when they are happy and all clapping and singing Dimambola. It's about how you deal with situations when things are rough. It is not when Ambazonians are struck and all of you run away and we have to find a way to give them a positive spirit. It's not about when generals falls and everybody is there complaining and attacking each other. For us, it's about rebuilding that unit and projecting a sense of continuity. It's not about when a village is burned down and we are all on social media attacking La Republique. It is about how we make sure we respond to that. You can prescribe 100 strategies online. You can talk about rubber gun project. I buy the RPGs. You can talk about artilleries and whatsoever and end up never putting one. We put it on the ground. It is not about screaming on social media. It has its place. And I can assure you that the last 3 weeks has been very good for Amazonia. Where you see valleys, I see bridges. Where you see unscalable cliffs, I see the plain of Ndop. Where you think this is noise, I see agitation. I see the creation of nationalism. And the one thing I have taken away in the last 3 weeks has been the cohesion on ground zero. We've done surveys. People are extremely happy. Ground zero thinks, we should escalate. My chairman in Ireland has said it's a month of excavation. Excavation. I love that word. Where you see people doing audios and being angry, I see positive vibration. I see Thomas Sankara's madness. Our struggle is on a solid foundation. It doesn't mean we don't have weaknesses. Sometimes you hear me talk about solid foundation, you don't understand. Some of you understand. Every liberation struggle rests on key pillars. On key pillars. So the way you examine the viability of that liberation struggle is by examining those key pillars. So far, the key pillars are standing. And we should be proud of ourselves. We have talked about changing of taxi colors. Some people are not happy. I've listened to some short audios and watched some short videos. And some people are like, it will not happen. If I see anybody enforcing change of colors, then you are from the DDR. After they do like that, they go and sit and take some fufu and coffee and drink. One of the reasons why I avoid making myself a fool is when I really know I'm wrong. I sit back quietly. You know, you find Amazonians calling their own forces DDR, calling them rogue forces. You know it's personal. It is not ideology. It is not a difference in strategy, in objective. It's personal. You see, the crime of genocide is very personal. That is why crime of genocide is very close. Hacking, killing with knives. It's personal. So individuals feel like they are challenged. Because for a leader to go out like this and speak, for a member of an association to go out and speak, you need somehow a team to review your rhetoric. I remember I went out the other day and I made a statement and I said, some of these people will be tried for crimes against humanity. When I dropped the microphone, I got a call from my father in the US. And he asked me, why did you make that statement? And I had a 5-minute argument. He said, no, the statement was not correct. You can't do that. I said, really? He said, yes. I said, okay, I promise I will not make that statement again. He was happy. You know, sometimes I do an audio and the spokesman will come and say, I don't think this thing flies. So I'm held to account. I'm held to account. And that's the beauty of my leadership. You know, that sometimes when you see AGOVCs battling and standing by policies, it doesn't really mean because they are AGOVCs. Anything that escalates, anything that gives Ambazonia, teeth to bite, it's embrace. Some people will really go out and engage in these heinous attacks. It is also because they have seen that some of these policies empower us. It is not about the fact that they hate the policy. It's about the fact that they see themselves so preeminent, so important, that they ask themselves, who the hell are you, Choa Yaban, AGOVC, to design a workable policy without getting a stamp of approval from our offices? Who the hell are you to attempt to take this struggle forward when we have told Ambazonians for years that you are an obstacle to this struggle? That's why it's personal. And I ask you to forgive them. They don't know what they are doing. All taxis will change their color. It is liberation law. And this is the good news. This is the good news. We are moving into other sectors. Ambazonians on the ground, I want all of you to embrace this season of escalation and excavation. I want you to embrace it. That is the only way we can speed up our freedom. Cameroon is so arrogant that it doesn't care. They believe strongly, and that's why they've been propagating the notion of return to normalcy. Because for them, chaos is the presence of war. Normalcy is the existence of victory. So where do you want to be? You want to create your normalcy and give a self-defeating perception of victory for the enemy? So today I want to ask every Ambazonian to rededicate to an outcome that is very certain. Cameroon as a state does not have a future. It is going to crumble. Be prepared to receive millions of Cameroonians as refugees in Amazonia. Be prepared that the economic collapse of Cameroon is going to affect our economy. Be prepared to see desertion in the ranks of Cameroon's military. We must strengthen our forces. We must involve our civilian population in the collective opposition to Cameroon. Liberation wars are fought in the territory of those who seek freedom. That is why they bear the burden of the resistance. Our people are suffering, but that suffering is due to the occupation, is due to the loot. Changing your taxi color does not add any suffering to you. Nothing. You have accepted to lock your shops on Mondays. We lose millions in that. We don't cry, we don't complain, because we know it is our own contribution towards our freedom. Others have given their lives. Others are in jail. Others have been disappeared. Others' homes have been burnt. Every Sunday, we stay home for salvation. Every Monday, we stay home for freedom.